Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to let some folks kind of sit down before we get started. Just really quickly, I'll be moderating. My name's Alby Bocanegra. I am the Vice President of Global City Partnerships for Mastercard and City Possible. And co-moderating and co-hosting with me is going to be Randall White. I'm going to let everyone kind of make formal introductions of themselves and talk a little bit about their work. But first, indulge me, and I'm going to share a little bit of an abstract with you, just conceptually on what 24-hour cities are, and why we're talking about 24-hour cities, nighttime culture, and the nighttime economy at a Smart Cities conference, which is probably what most of the people out there are wondering. Couple of things here, right? First is life in cities does not stop after the sun goes down. Neither does technology, and neither does the movement in cities. So I think the majority of the conversations we're having about running cities is in the construct of the daytime. And so the night, if you think about it, not only does it nurture a city's social and cultural needs, but it also provides economic opportunities for its residents and its businesses. However, the night's historically been a blind spot for urbanists, and so the concept of nighttime governance it's fairly new in the smart cities context. And so I wanted to bring that conversation to the table. Also, the rise of the night mayor and the night advisor and the nighttime economy councils and commissions around the world has helped the emerging field of the nighttime economy. And it's helped it grow. It's created new opportunities for us to look at the nighttime as a green field for the development and use both of people and technology-centered strategies that make cities more livable, because ultimately it's about livability. Also, cities that are going to create strategies and set policies to ensure that cities are safe, prosperous, and enjoyable at night are going to lead the competition for investment, for livability, and for movement, especially now in the new working world where people have choice on where they're going to live, where they're going to work from, and it's less about commuting, less about other aspects that we generally, in the traditional sense, have looked at in cities. And so more than anything, though, to create these strategies and to create these governance models, you need leaders. Every city, whenever developing anything new, needs a North Star. And so it needs someone to really kind of develop the strategies to create the governance. And so that's why we have this great panel here today of experts that have done that have done the work and laid the groundwork for what I think is going to be probably one of the largest aspects of the Smart Cities conversation. And so I want to welcome our panelists this morning, welcome everyone to the discussion. And so what I wanted to start off with was a brief introduction of our panelists. We'll go last with my co-moderator, Randall, because he's going to start us off with some questions. But in your intro, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you're doing. But more than anything, I'm curious about your origin story. What got you into this line of work? What got you interested? I think we all have something inside of us that attracts us to the work that we do. So I'm curious to hear that. And so what we'll do is we'll start with Sarah, go over with Raheem, and then we'll end with Randall, and then move into the questions. Does that work? Yeah? All right, let's go.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hannah-Spurlock. I am the City of Fort Lauderdale Nighttime Economy Manager, so right down the street. My origin story is probably a little bit different than other origin stories in my role anyway. I am a adult lifelong local government bureaucrat. I have worked in local government for over 20 years, typically in the city manager's office. And when this role became open and available to me, it was very exciting because it was something different than what I had done for 20 years. But also I have a soft spot in my heart for the hospitality industry. I waited tables, I bartended in my youth to get through school. So I understand those challenges and opportunities and the excitement that the nightlife has to offer, and it just seemed like a real exciting dichotomy from what I was accustomed to. So again, I was always in the city manager's office. Now I'm in development services in the planning department. So I work with urban planners and I work with our code folks, the engineers, the folks that help with design and creating that nightlife plan for cities.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. So I am Raheem Manning. I am the Director of Nighttime Economy and Business Development for the City of Philadelphia. I'm actually the first in my role in the city. So I'm from West Philadelphia, born and raised. You guys were supposed to finish that. In West Philadelphia, born and raised. the playground I used to spend most of my days.
I was about to finish it for you, but
And so the way I got into this role is that I own a company called The Weekender Experiences. It's an entertainment travel, it's a travel entertainment and event management company. And so it's taken me to over 200 cities worldwide. I am an avid frequenter of nightlife around the world. And I was appointed to a task force for the city of Philadelphia, an art and culture task force. And the job of the task force was to assess the effect of the pandemic on the art and culture sector of the city, which in Philadelphia is a $4.4 billion a year impact on the economy. And so through that research, we started looking at how the nighttime economy was affected. And I began speaking with nighttime economy directors, mayors, managers all around the world, from the very first in Amsterdam to some more recent ones in D.C. and in Atlanta. And we saw that there was a need for this position in Philadelphia, someone to really drive the city to become a 24-hour city, as we'll talk about what that means more, but also to advocate for those in the nighttime economy. And so I, along with a couple other people, wrote a proposal to City Council. That proposal was adopted into law, and then I got the position of being the first night mayor of the city of Philadelphia. So again, mine is a little bit of that fun part, and then a lot of that research part, seeing where we could effectively steer the city to be a 24-hour city.
My name is Randall White. I hail from Dallas, Texas. Don't hold that against me. My own background is I grew up in a theater family. In my family, I had a brother who was an athlete, and he was the weirdo. I studied theater. My father was a theater professor. My brother was a theater professor. I wound up in pursuing theater, wound up working in the arts nonprofit realm, learned how to ask people for money. And once you do that, your career is set in the nonprofit sector. I worked for 25 years as the executive or the fundraising director for various nonprofits, mostly in the arts sector, some in the diseases, as we used to say, and then jumped over to the consulting world, where I worked with corporations, helping them build better relationships with nonprofits in the community. In that world, politicians began to hire me to be their representative during their campaigns to constituent groups. And then that blossomed into a whole full-scale, blown-out lobbying career, because once people realize you have a relationship with politicians, they'll pay you to talk to them for them. So I did that. The restaurant industry was one of my largest clients. And during the work with the restaurant industry, an issue surfaced in 2 neighborhoods in Dallas where some residents near nightlife districts were having problems with noise and violators and all that kind of stuff. And the policymaker decision was to shut those suckers down, to close them at midnight. And this was 8-9 years ago, when Sydney, Australia had just come out of, was dealing with their lockout laws. That was their solution to dealing with nighttime problems, to close everything down. I led an effort from the nightlife community. We would go down to City Hall with 500 waiters, kitchen workers, bouncers, and we stopped 2 ordinances from being launched at City Hall. This led to the creation of a nonprofit organization in Dallas that's focused on the nighttime economy. There is a guy out here, one of the booths said, "Nighttime, Dallas?" Yes. But from that, I then retired, and now 24-Hour Nation is really my pastime. This is my continued platform to be an evangelist, if you will, for the value of the nighttime economy, no matter the size of your city. Raheem and Sarah both are the chief nighttime officers in their cities. There are 13 cities in the United States that have someone like them, as large as New York City, as small as Iowa City. And these are cities that realize that they've got to think about their nightlife districts differently. Where the policymakers and the city council people and the mayor goes home, goes to bed after 5, someone needs to be marshaling the resources of the city to continue to serve those people who live, work, play, operate businesses at night. And I want to be clear about one other thing. It's not just about nightlife. There are entire industries that operate at night. every city just about is a 24-hour city. We don't think about transportation, first responders, healthcare industry, particularly in a post-COVID environment, how many people are working from home, and the goods and services that these people do not get because they don't work 9 to 5. So I'm glad to be here, Alby. Thank you for inviting me. Sarah, Raheem, these are two very, very skilled people in their field. I'd like to start with a question. Sarah's in Fort Lauderdale. The focus of your office largely interacts with the hospitality sector because Fort Lauderdale is a place you want to go. So tell us a little bit about how you present that work. How do you work with the hospitality sector? The hotels are involved, the restaurants are involved. How do you interact with the private sector in Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about the whole concept that nothing good happens after midnight. And that's kind of how governments and cities tend to look at things. It's only revelry and chaos that happen late at night. And so the only people that really need to be working are the police officers to arrest them and the fire department to, resuscitate them when they pass out or get, shot by somebody. So, and when my role was first created, it was actually in that enforcement vein. So I was given a team of police officers, code officers, folks from the fire marshal's department, sanitation workers, and the job of this team was to be out at night till the bars close at 4, just making sure we kept a lid on the chaos. I did not see my role to be about enforcement. I think there are better ways to manage a life at night. That's what I like to call it, life at night, not nightlife. So we went on to become partners and to collaborate with these venues and operators at night. So I developed a role for the office to be a liaison, really, between the hospitality industry and the city. And I feel like that was a huge hole, a huge void in the hospitality industry. I feel like they've always felt like the redheaded stepchildren of the business world. And my job, as I saw it, was to put them at the big kids table, give them the voice in policy decisions that the city were making about parking, about transportation, about law enforcement, things that directly impact them, but they never felt comfortable saying anything because there seems to be this fear in the hospitality world that we don't want to make the government upset because then we won't get our permits. We won't get what we need to open our business. And it really is shocking how often I hear that, even to this day. And I feel like one of my greatest assets in this role is the fact that I have worked in local government for so long. I know how to navigate that system, and so I know how to be that person, that go-to person that they can call and say, how do I do this? Or even they don't know what they don't know, really. So I see my role as a lot of education, but I also like to develop those relationships with business associations, particularly hospitality associations, and let them know that we're interested in their employees and we're interested in making our nightlife vibrant and safe without only law enforcement, with not just code compliance. So even when I had my team of officers in code compliance, we wanted them to know that we were a partner. We want you to succeed. One of the big issues in Fort Lauderdale, as I'm sure is the case in a lot of urban cities, is noise. So that's probably the biggest complaint, is how loud all these places are. And you get enough neighbors complaining about the noise, and that's all the city hears. Noise complaint, they must be too loud. Well, we have noise ordinances, as do most communities, and what we found out through my team was, in fact, they weren't breaking the law. They were within their allowable sound levels. So we became then not just enforcers, but we became their partners and their advocates to say, they're following the law. So, they're not all bad. It's developing those relationships and having someone they can trust in the city industry and the local government industry.
Well, and I think so from the traditional cities perspective, there are plenty of internal municipal government officials that represent the resident. There's like the public advocate office. There's plenty of that in the traditional sense, but I think the advocacy side from the business perspective and from the nightlife business perspective is, I think, what some cities have missed, is that you need this internal person that is both coordinating internally and externally to make sure that everyone's kind of joined at the hip, where like we do it for the resident, right, in a traditional city concept. And so that's what I think was...
Yeah, and especially during the pandemic, it became crystal clear to communities how much their hospitality industry contribute to the character and uniqueness of their community. And without them, they're just another city. They're just another, place with streets and sidewalks. It's the restaurants and the museums and the artists and the creative energy that was missing. And that became very clear with the pandemic. That was one of the bright sides. So we were able to focus on that and say, you know what? Now you see how important we are, how important this industry is. What can we do to make their life easier and make them successful so that our destination and our city can be successful?
The COVID pandemic, of course, severely affected the nighttime economy. Concert venues, music venues, dance events, restaurants, bars. In the UK, they're estimating that 70% of the pubs will not survive the 1-2 punch of the COVID pandemic, now followed by the energy crisis as a result of political dynamics in Europe. One of the things that 24 Hour Nation does is we have podcasts, webinars, resources specifically for nighttime advocates. We also park a lot of information about new and intriguing things for people to do in cities in America at night. So I'm always on the prowl for new restaurants that are opening, new hotels, world premiere events. That's one of the things 24 Hour Nation does. Also, there's other networks here. Alby's own 24 Cities Global Network is something to tap into, be aware of. I'm sure you can go over to the City Possible Lounge and just see all of the cities around the world that are part of his network. But at the same time, Sarah and Raheem and I and others are members of a group called NCAP. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about NCAP?
Yeah, well, it's actually Nightcap, N-I-T-E.
I'm sorry, NCAP. That's something at a grocery store.
Yeah, that's an NCAP's in a grocery store. Nightcap, N-I-T-E-C-A-P, Nighttime Economy and Culture Policy Alliance. And we are a professional association of local government night managers, and we concentrate on good governance at night. So we are interested in policy. We're interested in helping cities do the right thing to plan for their night. So again, that's Nightcap. We're about a year old, but we are really building some momentum to advocate for better planning for cities at nighttime.
I stand corrected. Nightcap. NCAP has to do with the previous client. Raheem, one of the newer nighttime economy managers in the States. We've enjoyed many conversations. I'm very intrigued with what inspired your city to focus on this. What made Philadelphia go, we need to go here? How did that happen? And then you all developed your own plan, not out of the club scene, not out of the hospitality scene, but from the perspective of the arts and cultural scene. Talk about that.
Right. So what made Philadelphia go here and say, hey, we need this position? Well, that would be me, along with some other people of the Art and Culture Task Force. And so, we come from a place of advocating and supporting art and culture in the city. And again, especially at a time where, a lot of cities had to cut their budget. And in Philadelphia, the mayor zeroed out the art and culture budget as a response to the pandemic and everything closing down and not getting tax revenue, because we're a wage tax heavy city. So when people went to work from home, there was no wage tax coming in. So the budget had to be done. So what we did was we advocated that, hey, art and culture is still going to be the way we get through the pandemic. It's still going to be the way that people survive being quarantined. And so how can we uniquely support the art and culture sector? But then we also, again, discovered that the nighttime economy was not being supported. Now, the correlation between the two is that most of art and culture happens at night. And we think about museums and we think about that, but when you're looking at a dinner and a show, when you're looking at going to a concert performance, or if you are an artist or a DJ, most of the time you're getting your bread and butter from venues that are operating at night. And so when we made that correlation, I went on this tour with city council and some of our state representatives, hey, this is a position where, cities that are thinking about tomorrow, about coming 24-hour cities, have someone managing this, and we need this here in Philadelphia. And I think through that advocacy, we were able to get that. But I think we were also able to get it and do it in a unique way, right? We placed it in the Commerce Department because one thing we wanted to position to look like is not enforcement. We're not here to shut anybody down. We're not here to, get fines. We have, the departments that are doing that. What we're coming is to provide support, and you have a government advocate to help you thrive. You have a government advocate to connect you to resources in the city to help you survive, again, the pandemic and a sluggish, recovery, especially with nighttime business, because it's you're open one moment, then you're closed, and you're open one moment, and then you're closed, and that was just killing a lot of the nighttime economy. But now we have someone to, in our government, myself, to advocate for and connect those businesses with the resources of the city.
Well, so you're bringing up a really important subject here, which is the nighttime economy is the economy. And so the ability to be able to measure and evaluate economic impact that the nighttime industry has on a city is super critical right now. So maybe each of you, can you share a little bit about how economic impact is driving some of the work that you're doing and maybe even some of the measurements you're looking at?
So one of the things that I have been pushing for since I started, I've had this role now for almost 5 years, is to do a fiscal impact study. It serves a couple of purposes. Number one, it's incredibly enlightening. Suddenly everybody realizes the employment numbers, the tax dollars that are produced, just the general revenue that is produced at night. The Mastercard has done studies, and they've shown in communities around the world, I think Berlin comes to mind, that 30% of their in-person transactions were at night. I mean, that is very significant. And when you think that a city's resources are so focused on 9 to 5, and they're missing the boat on all this life that is happening after 5. I mean, in the case of Berlin, 30%. So I feel the enlightening part is critical to making our case for building a nighttime momentum. But the other purpose is that it shows a benchmark. So you know what you have to improve on. You do a nighttime study and you figure out what your economy is worth at night in 2022, and then you do it again 3 years later, 5 years later, and you can see where you've made progress or where you've regressed, and you know what you need to focus on as a city. And so I finally have gotten this approved for this next year budget starting October 1st.
Yeah, congrats on that. Yeah.
It's huge. So super excited about being able to accomplish that because I really think it'll be a game changer.
Yeah, I think for Philadelphia and the advocating of this role, I kept throwing out that, $4.4 billion art and culture and nightlife impact, right? And again, that doesn't single out the nightlife, but we know that most of the art and culture that people are experiencing are happening at night. And that was, again, it's a city where if it makes dollars, it makes sense. So that got a lot of people's attention. And I think the other thing is in Philadelphia, art and culture and nightlife, for every dollar invested, it's a 300% ROI. And so, for every dollar that, a city invests in its art, its culture, its museum structure, 300% comes back on that. Because if you're going to visit the museum, you're probably going to pay for parking. You're going to get a drink afterward. You may get dinner afterwards. You may see a show afterwards. And so all of that adds up, even though the draw for you to come into the city might have been going to see the Liberty Bell, right, which is one of our big draws there. But the impact of it, again, is a 300% ROI. And when you start talking like that, and again, the pandemic put us in a great position to show when you're talking about collecting those tax revenues. When things shut down, when people weren't able to gather, venues are closed, the policymakers were able to look at those numbers and say, wait, we got to do something here because this cannot continue. And so I think, we were able to utilize those numbers. Again, we want to do an economic impact study as well, and I'm advocating for that. But with any policymakers or any lawmakers, especially those that run from 9 to 5 and go home, you got to show them dollars.
And I think this is a great tie-in to what the Smart Cities Conference is about, with so many technology people, so many data people here, so many infrastructure people here. What we're talking is about needing the data to measure the night. I spoke yesterday with a gentleman who's got software that tracks where people move, where they cluster. What a tool that would be for public safety, to be able to preempt and go, you know, there's something going on. We're suddenly seeing all these dots at this intersection. How valuable that would be in terms of data. We have so many, I've walked up and down and talked to all the trades representatives here saying, think about your application for the nighttime economy. I challenge you to use the night as your lab. Use us as your lab. There are major nighttime economy economic impact studies in London. New York City has a great one. Washington, D.C.'s done one. London's is very impressive because it let them know for example, I think they learned that 6% of their workforce were nighttime home health care workers. Once you know that and you realize that these are people with transportation challenges, these are people who are probably in their second or third job. These are likely people who do not match the same demographic profile as folks who work by day. It presents equity issues, it presents transportation issues, it presents goods and services, delivery of needs that the people who work at night, the people that work by day don't get. So if everyone in this room and everyone out there would just put nighttime in their heads and think about what I do can help that, it would be beneficial to all of us. I want to talk a little bit with Raheem about, we did a workshop webinar earlier this week with Raheem and 3 of his colleagues, including the woman who's Chief Information Officer for World Cafe Live. You're probably familiar with it from the public radio broadcast of World Cafe. Also with the gentleman who runs the Anderson Street Project, which is a web-based information program of R&B and music for the black community in Philadelphia. And then also on the panel was Michael Fitchman, who's with the Weitzman School at University of Pennsylvania. He is a data junkie, and he understands data and how it applies to nighttime activity. You all wrote an opinion piece in the Philadelphia Choir this summer after a mass shooting in Philadelphia. It happens. You can name the cities: Austin, Sacramento, Chicago. Happened in Philadelphia, and you all came together and said nightlife is not the problem. Nightlife is not the problem. Nightlife can be the solution. Summarize that for us.
Yeah, well, what we first seen is that a lot of times when you have mass shootings happening, especially if they're in an entertainment district, it puts the it's bad PR. Like, hey, you know, at night we're going to go out, bad things are going to happen. Again, like you said before, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, we were able to aggregate some data that showed that most violent crimes in the city did not happen in correlation with a nighttime establishment or venue. And so what we wanted to do is let the city know that, hey, instead of going the Sydney, Australia route or some of those route where you shut all the activity down, well, you can empower and provide resources to the nighttime operators to ensure a safer entertainment district. So what does that look like? It looks like training our venues on conflict resolution, active shooter training, harm reduction trainings, providing them with resources so maybe they do have better mass scanning when it comes to entertainment districts and looking at weapons and what people are bringing in. And I think we were looking at how we can get ahead of the bad PR for that particular situation by putting this Inquirer article out and giving specific things that the city could do right away to fix that. And I think that it was pretty effective because a lot of people did read it. And again, at that time, I was coming into this position. And then right when I got into position, I was put to the task force to kind of review how we were going to come out of that mass shooting and the PR part. So I think it was a very effective article. And again, it was just looking forward like, hey, nightlife is the solution. When you have more people in a place, it is likely to be, more safe. It's less likely for nefarious activities to happen. When you're looking at nighttime corridors or you're looking at design, how you're lighting up a corridor, how are you making people feel safe so that they don't, succumb to just the environment or something that may have happened.
I think also, too, there are some lighting technology people who've been speaking. We talk about light. Light's the solution. Light's the solution for night. That is not 100% correct. In Amsterdam, they found out that when the bars were letting out, if they ever let out in Amsterdam, that people were all being dumped out into the street at the same time, drunk, okay? And there were big lights around the Rembrandtplan, large like Broadway, Times Square lights. And they found out that lights could be too bright. And that if the lights were too bright, it incented more crime. The other thing too is there are so many men in lighting design that they light for themselves at night. They do not light for women. It's different. I can walk, as I did last night, until midnight, walked around Miami Beach, sketchy blocks, great party blocks. I felt comfortable. I'm a 60-ish white, ostensibly white man, really Cherokee, but that's another story. And I felt completely comfortable. I would doubt that most of the women here would feel comfortable walking alone at night. It's not lit for women. It's just not. They like to cast shadows. They create bus stops with shields where you can't really see what's in the bus stop. We're not thinking about gender inclusion. There's so much programmatically that the nighttime economy can attend to. Alby.
So I think, actually, you brought up a really good point, which is around urban planning and the way that cities are planned and who they're built for and who's really thinking about that. And so, Sarah, you were just sharing a little bit about your office kind of being in the urban development and urban planning, which is a shift from what it originally was. So how do you think that's going to make an impact now that you actually will have a direct link into how the city of Fort Lauderdale is planned, and how can other cities learn from that and better integrate with the Office of Urban Planning and Development? Yeah,
so you've both made excellent examples. You know, SEPTED, what it was SEPTED stand for? Enforce public and what? Safety through environmental design. Now I can't remember what SEPTED stands for, but anyway, it's about planning for better safety at night. You know, when the sun goes down, it's a different ball game. And Randall talked about women, but all marginalized populations that may suffer, the queer community, the women community, anybody who's a minority in the community that they're trying to navigate through, are become even more marginalized when the sun goes down. So what are cities doing to address that? How are we making our communities more inclusive for that diverse population so that all these different communities feel safe? So I mentioned earlier that I moved from the city manager's office and now I'm in development services, which is code compliance, urban planning, and that's what I hope to address now that we have those resources and those direct contacts with those groups. The DRC process is a perfect example, the development review process. Whenever a new development wants to build in Fort Lauderdale, they go through the DRC process. I encourage these folks, and now that I'm one of them, to look at the design of these buildings, to look at the parking situation, the sidewalk situation, the lighting situation from a nighttime perspective. It's, you know, Randall said it beautifully. Everything that we do, we need to also look at it from a nighttime lens, because our nighttime is just as relevant as our daytime. And it's about planning. It's about transportation planning. It's about accommodating a nighttime that is safe, and that doesn't just mean guns and badges. That means activity. That means a diverse activity. For example, keeping libraries and museums and parks open past dusk. Then you're creating a diverse environment that doesn't just turn off at 5 o'clock, where you've got families that are around till 5 o'clock, and then boom, someone turns off a light switch, and all you have are the thugs. I mean, I think that's the perception in a lot of people's minds. By keeping those cultural, creative, family-oriented opportunities and amenities in your community open later than dusk, you're creating that diverse population that has a natural calming effect on bad behavior. So these are things that planners know about. Planners are probably the most progressive of any local government employee. they get all this. So getting your planners involved, being part of the planning department, I think will be a real opportunity to boost our nighttime destination.
Well, and then I think all of us have touched on this too, is for some reason, when it comes to the night, many assumptions are made. We tend, whether you're a municipal employee or someone just working in a city or community in a city, there's a lot of assumptions and myths and things that come with the night. Maybe I'll leave it to Sarah and Raheem. If you want to just maybe, if there was like, what's your top one that you wish that you could help dispel?
Yeah, I'll say the number one thing is that cities don't shut down at night. Yeah. I think that's what we think that because it's after 5, we go home and you're home, but cities are just as active at night as they are in the day. Commerce happens at night. People work at night. People are, of course, looking for entertainment purposes and eating. And the way we're going into a new world where people are working from home, the night is now like their refuge to get out of house, right? Because they worked all day in the home and they're going out. And so we have to shift that when we're thinking the night, that there's less like to worry about, where there's actually more, right? Because you have to then, look at the environment like we've all talked about. And so like when I'm telling people about this position, they're like, okay, yeah, you want to make Philadelphia a 24-hour city. Well, what does that look like? What does it mean to be a 24-hour city? And we had the joke earlier, like it doesn't mean looking like Vegas, even though that's a good city that operates all around the clock.
Cover your ears, yeah. Michael Sherwood, if you're out there.
But being a 24-hour city means that you have a plan for what your city looks like at 2 p.m. and at 2 a.m. And a lot of cities operate where they plan from 9 to 5 and then they go home and hope it works at night. And then we have to change that. Just with the new technologies that are coming out, the way people are moving, the way we are changing as a culture, we have to be very vigilant in what our after hours economy looks like and how we're supporting them. I think that's the thing too. It's one thing to think about it, but nighttime businesses and the nighttime economy needs support, infrastructure, policies that make business easier and not harder. And I think that's one thing I would love for people to look at. Life continues on when the sun goes down.
Amen. Sarah, some thoughts?
Yeah, so I feel like I've kind of been preaching this for our whole session here, but getting the city services to think about the nighttime, and that the only employees operating in most cities at night are law enforcement, and the rest of the employees are there on a reactive basis. So you probably have lots of employees that are on call. If there's a water line break, if there's some sort of issue, they're on call. Well, I would advocate for later hours for the city in general. So most town halls, city halls close at 5. What if we stayed open till 7 or 8? Wouldn't that just make a lot of people's lives easier? Maybe we open a little bit earlier. Instead of opening at 8 or 9, maybe we open at 6 or 7. Yes, obviously there are labor issues that would need to be worked through, but I feel like that needs to be the goal, and there needs to be steps that we take to reach that goal and not just automatically say, no, that's not going to work. So there's so many roadblocks in local government. You've got union contracts that prohibit a lot of stuff from happening, and just an overall mentality. The boomers are still running the world, and the boomers operate on a 9 to 5.
Well, most of them do.
Yeah. Well, sorry. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm right there on the border. But anyway, it's getting over that mentality, but that needs to be the goal, and not something that we just say no to. No, that can't be done. Well, why can't that be done? Well, because we've never done it that way. Well, let's start rethinking that. And we mentioned a lot here about 24-hour cities. I first, proposed a 24-hour city in Fort Lauderdale, and I saw that the arrows being shot at me, metaphorically. The 18-hour city is actually a very big thing right now. The hottest real estate markets in the country are 18-hour cities. Nashville, Philadelphia, Austin, these are really kind of 18-hour cities that cater to those aging millennials that now have families, but they still want to have those amenities of the nighttime.
It's the live, work, play model, and I think
18's fine. 18's cool, right?
As the millennial on the panel, I love the live, work, play model.
Alby, it looks like we're out of time.
We are.
I do want to just say again, issue a challenge to all of you that are here, part of the Smart Cities Conference, who are here because of the infrastructure, technology, data. How can the night be your lab? There's so much more we did not talk about. We did not talk about harm reduction. We did not talk about drug and alcohol use, all those other things that are typically applied to the night. There are solutions in this room for that challenge. Alby.
Yeah, and look, I think, the nighttime economy ultimately is the economy. It's an economic driver for cities. Things have to be paid for. Tax dollars have to be accounted for. And so we should invest in our nighttime economy just like we invest in our daytime economy. The end. Full stop.
One last commercial, 24hournation.com. We've got 20 different podcasts up right now, a webinar, all available with national, international nighttime thought leaders. Listen, learn.
All right, and just thanks to our panelists. Thanks to everyone
Thank
for
everyone
joining
listening,
us.
yeah.
We're going to stick around and hang out if you want to talk to our experts. And, thanks for joining.